and doing the things that the elected representatives want them to do for the constituents. And then the second reason is, you know, we spend a lot of time together, but we're always working on specific problems, and we really don't have a chance to sit to talk to each other about why are we doing this, what do we see as the problems with the city, what can we do to improve things, and as I said in my cue, you know, what would we need to do as a council for you to feel like the reasons you were running for council were starting to be addressed. And so those are the two things I think we're trying to achieve. And so with Fleur's help, we put together a little spreadsheet to kind of work through this sequentially. And you know, the goal is to basically revise that, and not all the small lettering so much as the big lettering, to get 4 major goals. And let's see, did we get those? Is she making those?
Yes.
That's okay, fine. So just so you have the existing plan in front of you. And then my thought is we'll get as far as we can tonight. We're obviously not going to do a lot of the small lettering objectives underneath the goals, but we might get a start on that. And then take a look at it 2 weeks from tomorrow to see what it looks like, and do that in a work session and revise it if we need to, put a rubber stamp on it and say that's good, and see if we can get this done. So, and then I want to be sure Carter has a chance to react to what we've done, to see if it's something that actually will work from a city manager perspective, if it gives him enough guidance to carry on from here. And then, as you all know, we're also going to finish with an executive session, so we want to kind of wrap things up. So we got 3 people's inputs electronically, but the way I'd like to do this is to take 1 column at a time and just have each person talk a little bit about what you think should be in this plan. And I put it this way: concerns, goals, but also constituent input, because a lot of times people will say, this is what I keep hearing from people, is the city needs to do X or not do X. And so it's pretty broad. And so I just kind of go around and you know, those of us that filled it out and gave it to Fleur, you know, can just pull off of that. But let's just see where it all goes. So anybody care to start? Okay.
We're starting with this column here.
We're going to do column 1, just kind of real broad. Basically, why are you doing this? Why? What do you think we as a council should be trying to achieve for the city?
I think the core function of government should come first, and that is infrastructure and public safety. Should obviously be the first priority.
Well, I agree with what Sean said, and I think part of it is internal efficiencies, and then understanding and applying proper spending to things. So when when we talk about rebuilding the road, or we're talking about rebuilding the road that needs rebuild, Midwest Avenue, that needs rebuilt. Also clearly put in there, this is what a standard road rebuild is. This is what we'd like to do to it, as far as bump outs and benches and decorative light poles. So we know what the necessity is and know what the amenities would be on it, so that we could make a scale judgment if we needed to on authorization for the money. So I think everybody agrees that thing needs a new road, and it's probably going to need all the, it's going to need all the underground utilities and that kind of thing. That's priority 1. Second,
so like
is
make a
the
distinction between the stuff that has to get done and the stuff that's optional if we can afford it.
Yeah, the difference between a 10-foot concrete path and an 8-foot blacktop path.
Okay.
And identifying what we currently have, our current infrastructure, what needs repaired and replaced on that before we start expanding, because it might stop our expansion. when we talk about adding amenities in a dog park or adding a dog park or something like that. Does it make sense to do that if other ones are unusable?
Take care of what we've got first.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve?
I guess just to add on to that a little bit too, is that prior to spending any money, whether it's to do studies or to move forward on any kind of a project, we need to make sure that all the front end work is completed. If we come back to any kind of roadblock that may stop that from happening, and an example that I'll give you is we're talking about the police department itself, and you know, we're having this group come in and take a look at it, and we're spending money on that. The flip side of it is we have a contract in place with the Hall of Justice that it's 100 years old, or it's a 100-year lease, 99 years, and that's something that needs to be addressed. So I just don't want to see us spending a bunch of money on something that we haven't worked out the minute details in the front end to take care of those things.
Do the homework first.
Yep.
Bob, you wrote some things down. What did you write down?
My goals really haven't changed since I've been on council. I ran on the kind of a thing that we need to look out for our infrastructure. We need to help the library, and I know we don't have much to do with the library, but we are 80% of their customers. And we don't provide anywhere near enough to that. But infrastructure does include things like public safety, and it does include the buildings we own, but it also includes some of the amenities that we have in our community that make it a livable community. And I think it's with what we have from a constitutional standpoint, we are given what we can do, and it's how we do that within that framework. So it's a matter of doing what you can do within the framework of the state of Wyoming Constitution.
Right?
I would say infrastructure. I know I'm kind of repeating some of the stuff that everybody has said, but we do have some major infrastructure issues that we need to address. I think our health care, health insurance is going to be a top priority that we're going to need to figure out how to adjust that, what that's going to look like. Our budget and spending within our means, while trying to continuing to develop the economy within the city of Casper.
Steve?
So I want to come back on what Ray was just saying. Obviously, the healthcare is a big issue, but also wages. And I know we're having that discussion in the March work session, but can't really say that we've lost a lot of employees because of the freeze on the wages, but I feel like maybe we're not gaining employees either because of the fact that they're looking at it as though if they sign on with us, they have nowhere to go. And I want to get beyond that. We need to be taking care of our employees. We need to be paying them what they should be paid. And if we want to look at a different system of paying them, that's fine. I just don't want to see this drag out forever. We need to take care of our people.
It's wages and benefits.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say I agree with Steve. Wages have been an issue in my mind for a while. You know, we have good recruiting efforts, but no retention efforts, I think. And also, one thing that kind of stood out to me here recently in regards to public safety, just in the last 3 days, there's headline after headline after headline of sex abuse of children. And I think that that's one area of public safety that kind of just goes ignored. Everybody talks about drunks and DUIs, but then that's not what I'm seeing in the newspapers. I don't know what the answer is. Whether that means we need to go to WHAM, the state legislators, to figure something out on the state level, but it's something that's been bothering me for quite a while. And when you see that many headlines in a 3-day span, it's pretty troubling.
It's a public safety issue.
It is. And it's happening in Casper and in our schools.
Who else? You can read mine, which was different. But you said something similar, Steve, in some of your comments, the demographic challenges.
Yep.
It's how I frame it. Where we've got to turn those demographic trends around somehow. And we've been losing our kids for far too long, and we haven't been attracting that generation to our community.
So on that topic, Chris and I were in a meeting with some alcohol dealers, and there was a local business person there that he brought up a good point. You look at the so they're looking at making like Casper College could become a 4-year college, and you look at the effect that would have on a community. It becomes 4-year. We retain a lot of our kids here that could go to school, but not only that, we're going to bring more in, especially if we grab onto some of the schools down there that are not, the two that I brought into here were directly from him. The nursing school, there's not a lot of money being put into it, or education itself. So if that could be brought to an institution here, then the amount of students you have, and obviously more money that gets spent in the community. But the flip side of that is that they're from the service industry, and their biggest complaint is good help, and there's not enough of it to go around. So obviously you have college students who would fill that niche. It just kind of seems like could be a win all the way around the board if we got to that point to where we could, or if it passes to where it could become a 4-year institute. So.
There's a lot of pushback. But Casper College is bigger than Black Hills State and Chadron. Okay.
I think with what you're saying, I've heard several council members and people say keeping our local kids here, or college students, but like we approved recently that person to start building anywhere from $350,000 homes to $1 million homes. And as I said, or said to other people, a younger person going to college, anybody can show me a kid at Casper College that can afford that home, I'll give you $100 right off the bat. I think if you build homes, people are more likely to stay with their homes than apartments. You sign a 6-month lease, you can bolt. Anything of that nature. If we can develop maybe somewhat lower income homes that those college students, newlyweds, anybody like that can buy a house, a starter house, if you want to call it, I think we're more likely to keep it. I mean, I don't know, you would know that better than I, but I just don't know any college student, younger college student that could afford some of the houses around here. And where you can go to Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and get the houses half than what we're getting here. I mean, I think some other ones is, I didn't hide it, never will, between the liquor restaurants and non-liquor restaurants for families that don't want to take their kids where they have to walk across a bar to get to the bathroom. I think we need a more of a balance regarding that. Developing downtown with local restaurants, merchant stores, and create more of a family-friendly activities within the city, because families is what's going to make up the city. It's what has, from the very beginning of Casper, families helped create this town. If we don't focus on families, we're not going to keep it.
Nice you to wait for me. Kind of forgot.
We did.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we all left it on you to figure it out.
Well,
Kristen, are you ready?
I don't want to sound like a broken wheel, but obviously
It's your turn.
public safety is big, and what Sean was just talking about leads into, it came from an alcohol dealer's discussion, but the more I've talked to people about it, the more I feel like it's a generally accepted concern. And it's not even necessarily in our control, and so I don't want to push on it too hard, but putting Casper like in a positive light. Because I think unfortunately what happens a lot is everything that somebody reads about here is, hey, we have an over-serving problem. Hey, we've had a bunch of kids who are being sexually abused. Hey, like, you know, these people. And it kind of just like builds up, and so I mean, if somebody was doing a web search or if somebody was talking to somebody here, they'd be like, well, Casper sounds absolutely horrid, but, so I mean, that plays into retention as far as recruiting people to live here, keeping them living here. If it just constantly feels like doom and gloom and clouds overhead, it's not going to be that hard to lose somebody when, you know, say everything they hear about Denver is great. Wages are going up, house prices are going up, everybody's so happy, everybody's healthy. I mean, if all of our headlines are the exact opposite, that plays against us.
They legalize weed.
It's the smog, it makes them confused. One of the things that I feel like, once again, I feel like, unfortunately, the things I'm talking about aren't necessarily directly in our control. For whatever reason, transparency seems to be a concern of people, but the more I learn and the more I look into things, I don't think necessarily that it's not that the city's not being transparent, it's just that for whatever reason, the channels of communication that it's coming through, I don't know if people are just not looking in the right channels. I don't know if we're not hitting the same channels that they're looking for. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, there feels like a general disconnect when I talk to people about just how they're getting their news, or, like people will email me about something. I had one gentleman send a very angry email about the liquor ordinance after the first reading. And he was basically yelling and, well, it isn't email, but capitalizing and calling me to action to vote against it. And I literally just emailed him back and I was like, there's really no point of discussing this. You clearly didn't even look up how I voted on this issue. Mm-hmm. So do your research and get back to me. And obviously he went to his research and emailed me and apologized, but they're not hitting the same channels that we're using. And I'm a numbers person, so things like the health insurance fund, etc., are important, I think.
I think transparency is obviously important. You know, I've been on council for 5 years, and it seems like the issue really isn't. I mean, we can't go knock on everybody's door and force people to read the city website or go to city council meetings, or, I mean, you can only do so much. The information's out there. Unfortunately, people rather just read headlines than actually read stories and go to meetings, watch the meetings.
True, but I don't think we should give up on.
We shouldn't.
The idea that we can do better.
And we can.
And that we
There's
can
always room for it, but
make things more accessible.
to me, it's, you can only do so much.
On that transparency issue, we have a social media presence.
Mm-hmm.
We have the media here, all the different disciplines of the media here at all of our meetings. And we have all of our stuff published on the website. So we have met all of those things. And there's not really another platform to do it. I'm not gonna follow the national trend and start tweeting things.
You should stand on the soapbox downtown.
Although I think we should.
It'll make us
No, I don't want to.
The only other thing I would like to see is, and we had it for a brief amount of time, but all of the projects that we vote on, so we'll literally knock millions out of the ballpark on some weeks, and they're major construction projects and that kind of stuff. I would like to have a spot on the website that showed what those were and the progress, and under budget, over budget, so that, well, this is for my own, but I think it would be useful for everybody in the city too, to say, okay, we've got, you know, the Midwest Street project, what is that, 50% complete, or halted here because of a funding issue, or it's above, it's below, and that way you can track the projects and we can track the projects, and you can get a good sense of where things are going. So if there was any improvements that I can think of, it would be that. and maybe even a progress chart on, people will think when they hear passed on first reading the liquor ordinance. What's the message? Passed on first reading, not, well, there's gotta be 3, right? So what's the next step? It might help some things, might cause more aggravation than others, but who knows?
Just kind of like a summary almost.
Like
of
progress
what's
report, a
going on.
summary, a status.
We can think about that in terms of objectives to work on as far as the overall goal of better communication, right?
Well, and following along with what Chris is saying there, it's discouraging to me when when we take a straw poll to see it at a work session. Is there a consensus to go this way or a consensus to go that way? Which I think is a good thing, because if I'm the only guy in the room that wants to do it this way, well, and I think that's a really good thing. But to me, it's discouraging then when it comes out in the press that, well, the council voted to change this and do this. And for instance, on the animal ordinance and on the liquor ordinance, the council decided to go this way or that way. And it's troublesome because nothing is decided until it's voted on in an open council meeting. That, and to me, it's, if I was a citizen and I'd looked at that and, well, I thought about wanting to go down and talk to them about that, but they've already decided. And that's discouraging. I know that the council understands that, but I'm troubled that I don't think that the media portrays it that way. So I think that's something that we need to think about. The city does a lot, really, to try to publicize what's going on and try to get the information out there. But obviously, unless you're, unless if you're a council nerd or whatever, I don't know what the right word would be, unless you're Leo Chernick or Mr. Steensland or
You call
someone.
them council nerds? You may want to backtrack there.
De-emphasize, de-emphasize.
But you guys know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no, I know.
Unless you're really interested and follow that, most people don't see that. But
Yeah.
then I noticed that like with Councilman Morgan, when he would have his coffee with a councilman. Well, I don't drink very much coffee, and I'm not inclined to go and want to start drinking a whole bunch of coffee. But people kind of landed on that. And then when he would put stuff out there on Facebook or wherever, people landed on that. And that's the way that most people get all their news today. I was talking to some people today that were telling me all about some things that happened yesterday. And well, where did you get that? Oh, it was on, there were pictures and there were all over this social media stuff. I don't know how you manage that and how's the best way to get that out, but that's how people are getting so much of their information, and a lot of it's not very reliable. And so, how we deal with that too.
So we started, if I may just follow up with Mike, because we started with kind of why'd you run for council? What do you really want to see the city achieve? So I'm going to ask you to comment on that, Mike. If you want to hear what Bob has to say and think about that, or do you want to go ahead?
I could go ahead and first I apologize because I just plumb forgot about this session tonight. I was rooting around in my doing some stuff in my basement, and what's funny is I met today with Judge Lund and had to go through the police station, and I did not realize that I was going to be coming down there when I put this T-shirt on this morning.
It's appropriate. And first of all, that myth is true.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, there are public safety, all that stuff. Yes, everybody agrees on that. But orderly, planned growth is a real big thing for me. And every time I drive around Wyoming Boulevard out to the east, it just grates on me because several years ago, the guy that was the city planner then showed up at a Lions Club meeting, and he had this master transportation planning map that showed how they were gonna run an extension from what I still call Outer Drive out to Hat 6, there at the intersection with Country Club Road. I can't describe how shocked I was when all of a sudden there's a big subdivision right there where that right-of-way would have to have gone. If we don't have planning for orderly transportation, things like that, that we're, you know, our city is not going to be able to grow in an orderly fashion. And I think that, you know, extending that on around out there is a really, really big thing. I have also got some ideas and some things that I want to pursue in the leisure services, because I think that specifically the perception of many people in town is that some of the things that are our greatest assets, people look at it like they're big liabilities, that they're boat anchors that we're dragging around, instead of being assets. And in some instances, the business models that the city has adopted with, for instance, the ski area and the event center, if you wanted to set up and wanted to choose a business model designed to lose money, that's what the city did. And I want to try to work, you know, to break out of that mold and get those things onto a more of an asset base, instead of just, you know, the perception that people have that it's you know, that they're just money pits, because they're not. They're, you know, that's the one thing that John Patterson, I think, really had a clear vision of. Those things are assets, and we need to treat them that way.
Bob?
But I guess I'm not sure where we're at.
We're still on column 1, just kind of whatever people want
Well,
to
we
say.
got sidetracked on transparency, and I was thinking, never mind. I'll talk about it when we get there.
Okay.
It's a secret.
I mean, the game plan, just to remind everybody, or maybe I didn't say this clearly, is we just kind of throw things out on column 1, and then we're just going to kind of see what themes we're seeing over and over again in people's responses that we can pull together to cut them down into some actual themes that we can focus on, of smaller number, and then sort of work on the language and see if we can gradually get to something like this. Okay? So, I still have another hand. Ken?
Go off of what Councilman Mike said. Going around Monday and visiting with all the firefighters and at each station was cool, but some brought up, as far as like you mentioned Event Center, but hoping on and trying to make that more activity based year round, where it's not just used 3 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year. A lot of guys like to bike, but they found that they get in trouble if they're biking up there, and
There used to be no trespassing.
right, and so and some of them said they'd even volunteer to create a bike path and clean it and do it all themselves, just to have it, you know, rope course, zip line. Things were brought up as far as that, but utilizing, like he said, the areas like that year round instead of.
Been talked about. Steve?
Well, and I like the idea of looking beyond. So case in point, this weekend, my wife was in Cheyenne at a hockey tournament down there, and their ice, on the time that it's done, they've actually bought like, I don't know how they're propelled, but they're inner tubes, and they actually have like bumper cars on the ice, and that thing just makes all kinds of money. So I think they're looking at, because, you know, obviously like your hockey seasons only last so long, they go from August until March, and then it's done. But for the rest of the time, it would be nice to have something like that to where you might draw some more people in and make some more money.
So a goal could be more efficient use of our amenities, and the
Yeah.
objective would be those kind of things underneath it.
I'm all about maximizing the use, you know, summertime, wintertime. I'm not all about adding more expense into things right off the bat. So,
A
you
zip
know,
line would
open
cost
up.
$1 million.
What's that?
A zip line would cost $1 million, what we were told.
Right, and
Yeah, so,
and will we not, will people be entertained by it for a little bit, and then we just won't see the use on it, I don't think. So, you know, you gotta open up Hogan for summertime use, and people will do it, and do exactly what Ken said, make their own trails and have volunteer groups that'll do that, but yeah, we don't need to hamstring ourselves.
That did get started a couple of years ago, there are some trails up there that.
Yeah, and I think that pendulum has swung, because as you were saying, you know, not too many years back, there was a big no trespassing sign up there, and they were, you know, pretty strident about enforcing that. But, you know, the guys that are up there now, and I think with Tim Cortez, I think that it's kind of going in a much more user-friendly direction. But I gotta tell you, and I pretty well, I know a lot more about the zip line business and that stuff. I would be very skeptical whether or not that would be a commercially viable thing up there, because you know, a lot of the big destination resorts are doing that. There are some things that those guys can do that are not going to work for us, but there are things that we can do that wouldn't work for them. You know, for instance, you know, getting the bike people a little bit more organized and getting them up there and saying, you know, okay, design this, work this out, let's put this in, and they can, you know, it can be water bars, you know, incorporate it into your water bars that discourage erosion and all kinds of things like that. And so there are some of those kind of things that we can do. That's what we need to look at.
And see if we can get the demand to the point where they can keep the lodge open.
Mm-hmm.
That's Sean.
I think one thing we should be careful of too is, when you're talking about amenities, is either meddling in or competing with private interests. And I think one of the big concerns people had when we started doing weddings at the lodge was that we're competing with private wedding venues, and potentially undercutting prices. So, you know, when it comes to not just amenities, but dealing with restaurants and bars and housing developments, a lot of that stuff is driven by the private economy, and I think there needs to be a balance. We need to be careful where we're putting our fingers in some of these things.
Yeah.
They know, again, talk to even the police, but also firefighters, I'd say. We brought up, we want to keep college students. If we could get the college to be a 4-year, you know, they talked about how they go down to Colorado or Utah to do or other places to do the zip lining, do the road course, do the biking, do all these. Yeah, we may have to invest money into some of those amenities, but if you don't invest, you're not going to keep them. What interest? What is there to keep them here in Casper for activities? Also. So, I mean, that I know the zip line being $1 million, it may only be fun for a bit, but you just got to add more to keep their interest, to keep them here. Because if we don't, I said half of the firefighters all said that they travel all over to go do something else because Casper doesn't have it, and that's money being spent outside of our state, outside of our city, that we're not making. We're not getting anything.
So I'm in this dual, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm in this dual role of trying to run this thing, but I'm also a member. And so my deal is that, getting back to the demographic trends, all the research that I've seen says there's 2 things that young people want to see in a community that they're going to move to or stay in. One is a vibrant downtown with stuff going on where they don't roll up the sidewalks at 5 p.m. on Friday. And at 5 p.m. on Friday is when things start. And there's a lot happening, and they just go there not because there's a specific reason, but because they know that going down there something's gonna be happening. The second thing is, they wanna live down there. They wanna get on a bike trail and cruise around, and they wanna be able to walk to a restaurant or a bar. And so for me, the biggest deficit that we're dealing with as a community, as far as reversing these demographic trends, is we don't have any place for people to live downtown. And that's the big deficit that we have. And I'm not talking about, you know, the stuff we'll see with the Plains proposals where somebody's gonna put in 7 townhouses. That's great. We need 700 of them, not 7. We need major residential developments, and that's what's gonna keep the development that we've seen so far alive, because all this development that we've seen is at risk because we don't have that third shift of people that are just living here to take advantage of all these cool things that have happened. And I'm worried that we're gonna start seeing some of those places stressed or even closed because it's just hard to keep things going if there aren't people living around your establishment. So, Bob?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Charlie, except I'm taking it from the geezer point of view. I moved downtown so I could walk to the bars, walk to the restaurants, walk to the movie houses, and walk to Davis Street Station. And I've lived downtown since 1992, so it's not just the young kids that want that. The difference is, right now, we can't even get market rate housing that I may be able to afford, let alone get housing that we can get kids into. That doesn't have to be bought housing, that can be rentals. And so the fact, we've had 2 different organizations point out that downtown residence is a requirement to make a viable downtown.
And I'm
you
not
look at
saying
any
the
big
government
city,
should build the housing, but I think we should create a task force of
enhancements.
people that are looking at what are the barriers? Why are our local
Bingo.
developers not finding a way to do this? And are there things that we can do to get out of their way and make it more feasible for them to take that risk? Because right now, they're saying, you know, it doesn't pencil out for us.
And be able to take some political risk,
And-
right here in this room.
And I think that you're exactly right about that, because for so long of a time, whenever anybody would, and you know, in my family, we used to own property downtown, which we sold a long time ago. Every time that we would think about, you know, well, we want to change our hotel to office space, the very first thing that we would get is, well, parking, you know, you gotta have parking. And with our property, that wasn't gonna be a viable thing. Properties that we had that were close to downtown. Every time we'd start thinking about, you know, well, this would be a nice little place for modest-sized apartments or anything. That parking issue was just, and I think that has, the reality of that has turned around some, but I don't think the perception of it has. Because I was walking around downtown this afternoon, and you know, you look at the ONS building, you look at the Turner-Klotman building, you look at so many of those buildings, there are unoccupied upper floors
Right.
that would be great to develop into apartments and lofts and that kind of thing, that, you know, like what Brian Scott did there with his place. You know, there are some modest efforts going on that way, but if there would be something that we could do to, you know, to kind of try to promote some of that. And you know, some of those buildings are owned by people that are, you know, kind of getting on in years and probably not real motivated to want to make changes. But like, you know, like Councilman Laird talked about with the guy with the what's left of the Gladstone Hotel over here, wanting to do things, and you know, some of them, they're real legitimate issues if you go in and do some things. Some of them, you know, you are exactly right, Mr. Mayor, with how can we not only get out of the way, but how can we get the perception out there to these people that we are not going to be in the way, because for 30 or 40 years, you know, that, what are you going to do for parking? What are you going to do for parking? Well, hell, we have a parking structure that's mostly not occupied.
Code restrictions and things
Mhm.
that you know are fine for new development, but and how do you convince developers that people might be willing or would be willing to pay half again as much in their rental costs or the cost of the per foot residence than they would on the outskirts of town. The data says there's a lot of people who would, but it is gonna be more, it's very expensive to convert those second floors into lofts. A lot more expensive than building a new apartment. So, but that's my deal, because not only does the research say that young people don't wanna live in the suburbs, they wanna live downtown, but that businesses that would be non-energy related aren't gonna look at a place that doesn't have those kind of attractions, because they won't be able to get the workforce to come live there and work in their businesses. And that's the kind of the full circle. So it's not just about reversing demographic trends, it's about getting serious about this diversification that everybody keeps talking about. And you can't beg people to come, you can't make them come, you gotta make it an inviting place with the amenities and with the housing options. So that's my deal. That's why I ran, that's why I'm still here. Kristen?
I'll pretend that I'm young. I have like 350 days left in my 20s, so we're gonna go with that I'm young. I know when we first moved here, I probably already said this, and you guys have heard me say it multiple times, we could almost convince none of our friends to take job offers here. They'd have like job offers here, job offers in Cheyenne, job offers in Denver, Idaho Falls, wherever. I think we maybe had like one of our couple friends move back from college with us, and they left within 6 months. But then on the flip side of that, a couple years into being a professional, like doing recruiting events and things like that, immediately, first question, what's your downtown like? I mean, they've already been talking to firms in Denver. They've already been talking to, I mean, not even towns that are just significantly larger than us, but towns that are, targeting young professionals, because they have those downtowns and they need those young professionals in order to make their downtowns work. So they take it upon themselves to almost seek them out. And so it's big.
So downtown housing is a priority.
Well, it is for me. I mean, there's 9 of us here, you know, so I'm just saying it is for me. So, that's the, see what sticks here that people are throwing out here. Chris?
I don't have any disagreement with downtown housing being a priority. The only thing we can do is not be a roadblock.
Exactly.
And the rest of it is up to private developers. So if there's vacant buildings in the tops of the old downtown and nobody wants to develop them, that's beyond our control. We can just make sure that we don't have obstructive codes. But when you say that, I want to be on the same page. When we're talking about this building over here, there's no way I can, in good conscience, say, yeah, a 100-year-old fire escape is adequate today, so we're just going to give you a pass on it.
Exactly.
There has to be modern safety standards put into these buildings.
That building's only 70 years old.
Oh, well, all right. Yeah, 100 years is the one where I'm tipping point.
But there are other infrastructure things that we can do to make it more attractive. When Midwest Avenue is done, that is one serious impediment, that transportation corridor, that will be fixed, that will hopefully, you know, persuade some developers that maybe now is the time. And those things are under our control to do them right. So
I agree. I agree with Chris, and I agree with you. Maybe not specifically say that downtown housing, but rather just continued downtown development is a priority. And it has been a priority for a long time since I've been here, and we've made extreme leaps. I mean, the whole downtown area is completely different from when I started in council. So I think we've done a good job so far. We just need to continue with that trend.
I think we're going to spotlight that as a goal, that we stop pigeonholing ourselves. Make Casper attractive for business growth. One of the aspects is the downtown. Well, I don't want to live downtown, I want to live in a suburb. What would I like out there? So don't look at this as a region and this is a city. So the overall goal would be to make this city an attractive place for incoming businesses. Because that's what we need. We don't need people just to move here and not have an income or a job. So we want to attract new businesses. What does that mean? Well, none of us have found that recipe yet. But it's a citywide project. So suburban areas, downtown, and they're all different pieces of the entire city, and we considered it as a whole, with goals being those unique areas that are attractive to people.
Mike, go ahead, and then we're gonna kind of transition to the second column and see
Yeah.
what kind of things we can pull out of there that everybody was kind of agreeing on.
I agree with what Councilman Walsh was just saying, that, you know, we have to take a citywide view. But I think we can look at some of the things that over the years have been successful. For instance, you know, the sandbar area here. Now, that was done with urban renewal stuff that was, you know, big, and money was available in the 60s and 70s and everything. Those kind of programs are not on the table anymore. The old Yellowstone district, you know, that's been a pretty successful thing for that area. I look at, you know, when you talk about having housing and things available downtown, not just at the core, but at, you know, you talk about a blighted area, man, you get over there by NCHS and in there. I would love to see if there would be some way that we could go in and do something like what's been done to the sandbar, like what's been, you know, kind of try to, you know, these are things that have worked, and try to find something that will work there. You try to walk around in some of those areas around there, you can't even walk, the sidewalks are horrible. You know, they're just not gonna, somebody that's, you know, not gonna be attractive just because you're sitting there looking at it, and man, you can't even walk on the sidewalk.
I'm gonna
And so,
interrupt you,
yeah.
Mike, now, because you gotta go, and we
Yeah.
got some food out there, so if you're gonna eat, we better go out there and get something to eat.
I'm not even hungry.
Oh, okay. Well, there is food out there. How about if whoever wants to get a plate, we'll get a plate, and then we'll go to column 2.
Yeah, and you weren't cutting me short, because that was
Yeah.
everything I wanted to say on that.
Well, I think it's,
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
just take like a 5-minute break to
Why
get
don't
a
you want
plate
to
if
reserve
whoever
your
wants
5
some.
minutes?
But I really do apologize for forgetting about this tonight.
Well, everybody was kind of talking about it for out here.
Yeah,
We were all saying that.
saying, boy, that worked was good.
It's that lack of transparency, because none of the city staff sent out information, or wait, was there? There was.
That's the trickiest thing, like, and that's what I'm saying, like, I'm not even saying it's a problem, because we're doing what we can.
That's how you
but
can-
we're not doing
Just
what
make sure
we're
we're-
just not doing.
My basic thing is,
You can't fight it,
I-
but
No,
idea.
oh
All
no,
you
so
do
I
is
just
say,
keep proving it to them.
yeah.
Every time, like this
hearing a whole lot about in the commentary is with regard to financial sustainability. I'm not sure where this council is with regard to that concept and where you'd like me to be in terms of offering you recommendations, in terms of budget measures and those kinds of things. I'm hearing pieces and parts about certain items of interest, but not overall, an overall view or vision. Service delivery is not clear to me either. From an infrastructure standpoint, I'm not very sure with regard to what we've talked about where you would like to go next from a planning standpoint, from a planning implementation standpoint. I did note some comments about 1% and how potentially the data may not have the efficacy you'd like to see as it relates to that, but moving forward, that kind of insight would be helpful too.
Okay. Anybody want to make a proposal for how to get started with Bob?
Well, I probably tend to be a little too conservative, but I really believe that a lot of our accounts are basically service accounts. Hauling trash and getting water and sewer and so forth. Those are simply accounts that you've got to be able to pay for what you do. And while we traditionally use 1-cent funds to supplement rates, I'm not sure that's a good plan, and I wouldn't encourage that. I would say the same thing about using 1% funds for non-capital items. I don't think we want to do that. We have done that just a smidgen, but once you open that can of worms, I think for us, and I'm not saying for all cities, but I'm saying for a city our size, I think we're hurting ourselves when we do that.
You kind of skipped a column.
Well, he was asking for
Yeah, I
response.
know, but we will be talking about how any of the goals that we come up with
Okay.
are influenced by 1%. So you're right to bring that up, but let's see if we can get our goals straight first, and then we'll talk about 1%.
Well, I'd be glad to talk about, we're talking about the question 1.2.
Well, we're talking about all of the things on the first column. What kinds of themes do you see in all of the comments that we can kind of pull together and say, everybody seems to be in agreement that this should be.
So this is different than the spreadsheet?
Yes, yeah. Chris?
I think we're all in agreement in one form or another of making the city attractive to promoting business growth.
Okay.
I also, it seemed like we were in agreement of responsible prioritized spending.
I'm sorry.
Responsible and prioritized spending.
Okay.
Could you scroll that back to where we can see the top things on the columns?
Just the common themes on everything we're
Oh.
talking about. on this one.
I apologize for butting in, Chris.
No, that's all right. And maximizing our resources, like Ken and the Judge were talking about on, year-round use of Hogan on the things that we already have, where it wouldn't cost us much to allow the use.
Okay.
And I don't know if we're in agreement. I'm in agreement with you on city salary and healthcare and benefits, making that package balanced and appropriate for all of our employees.
Well, there's three basically is what I'm catching. The attractiveness of the city, efficiency of using our resources and what we currently own, and then take care of our employees.
Yeah, and maybe it's mine, prioritize spending, being able to, what we need, what we want, and what we would be nice to have.
I think if you're talking about a big overall picture kind of a goal, what I think we need to try to keep in mind is, so that we're not fighting the last war, so that we're not making a city that like it would have been 50 or 40 years ago, but that we're making a city and a community that's gonna be, like you say, attractive and adapted to the future. And so I think we need to look at those kind of things. That what are the things that are, you know, that cities and towns that are progressing, what are they doing that we could be doing or should be doing to get out in front of those things?
Adopt current practices
Mhm.
or effective practices.
Our future practices. If somebody came in and said, I wanna build a mall here, you know, every place is tearing malls down. You know, but, and they're replacing them with things that look like our brick and mortar downtown.
Okay. Now, Fleur, as far as how we do this, you know, I guess what I'm thinking is the second column isn't necessarily going to be attached to anybody's name. It's really just the council kind of saying, as a group, here are 3 or 4 themes that we're seeing that we can maybe gradually morph into an actual goal statement. So, Chris gave us 3. How do they sound? Do people want to add something, change?
Mr. Mayor, I realize that we might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I want to be sure I understand the last series of comments with regard to Councilman Huber's example of building malls when we should be probably building other things and so on, modernizing our community. Are we talking about making the community attractive for business development and growth, or are we talking about something else?
Yes.
I'm a little confused. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes?
All. Yeah.
So we are talking about making the community attractive for business growth and development. Is that right? Or
Which obviously includes attracting a workforce.
Yeah, citywide. And then as part of our goals and objectives to do that, the subset of goals would be the downtown area, would be the suburban areas. It's the whole city, so what do we do?
blighted neighborhoods and
Yeah, we take a global look at the entire city. Each one, each section, each type has its own, would then set out its own plans to how do we make my part attractive.
And the goal of being more efficient with the use of our amenities also plays into that.
It does.
Okay.
Because if there's more stuff going on, the town becomes more attractive to those potential workers, the very people that you say we lost.
And as, you know, Councilman Johnson was saying, well, when we do things to improve our facilities, worrying about, well, that's gonna compete with private enterprise. Well, yes, it necessarily will, but also if you start looking at blighted areas, well, then people in other parts of town are gonna say, wow, geez, you know, you're benefiting those guys, not me. But I think what we need to do is look at, and I always use the analogy of growing the pie. You know, a small slice of a big pie is better than a big slice of a small pie. And to promote these things community-wide so that this benefits the whole community.
You know, something we're going to be talking about in future work sessions is this whole business of these opportunity zones. And the city will have some possible role to play in sort of greasing that process for some of our developers, which basically creates some very strong tax incentives for development to occur in the city's core. But it's there's a role we may have to play as far as helping people get off dead center and actually taking the initiative to do something with these tax benefits, which are part of the new tax law. And so we're not just spectators, I think, in this process. Okay?
So to go off with what you're saying, two things that you mentioned is one, kind of trying to get the whole town to grow, but trying to stay out of it. Try to let them make way, like we mentioned downtown, the apartments or the offices or whatever up top, but also including the tax. So benefits to it is, I guess, is what I'm saying for a common theme is we trying to allow them to grow and expand without putting too many rules or laws or zones or whatever, but yet what go in hand is the tax benefits.
The way I would put it is, I think the role of the local government would be to try to create the conditions where private investment looks like an attractive option in our city's core, where people can see themselves making money because some impediments have been removed or some infrastructure problem was addressed, or whatever the things that are under our control, or some zoning changes were made that didn't create safety issues, so that we basically make it more attractive for our private enterprise folks to take those risks.
That's what I said.
Yeah, yeah, so risk, yeah.
Well, and I think that you just touched on something too, that today I was dealing with some things, and these guys were saying, well, the inspectors won't allow this and they won't allow that and everything. And I was sitting there and I said, no, wait a minute. I talked to the city inspector, and well, it's these federal HUD guys that come in. And so, and how you know, our local codes, no problem. But then all of a sudden these HUD guys are coming in and just stacking stuff on, and it's just making this project worse and worse.
So why don't we stay with this one for now, since we're all talking about it, and see if we can come up with something more than just says make city attractive. How else could we say this where we're getting a little closer to a goal statement?
Why?
And then we'll move on to the employees and the other things we've talked about.
Well, but I think with some of these things like building and promoting growth and that kind of thing, that it's really important to have the city staff, you know, have it kind of inculcated into their process that they are here to help. They are not here to be like these HUD guys that are just coming in and just getting in the way of everything. And frankly, I have to tell you, in my little corner of the world, the city staff in the last several years has been very helpful that way. And that's something that I really think we need to hold out there and say, guys, come talk to the city engineer's office, and they can help you with this stuff. They can show you how to make it work.
Or assets, not impediments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything, any way you would want to say that, Ken? That, you know, basically.
Well, what did you? I saw that you kind of wrote down that at the very beginning what you said was actually really well said. But
What I put down, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, was create conditions where private investment in the city's core looks attractive. That was the statement that I wrote down from the mayor here.
see, and I'm thinking I'm talking about what you said, but also the fact not what you were saying is, I don't know how to phrase it, but that we aren't put in conditions that we're by making downtown and the city whole giving incentives, finding incentives, but not having a lot of regulation. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to throw out something because,
If anything, we're gonna remove regulations.
right, make
Yeah.
regulations not, you know, we gotta keep up like fire code and stuff, but remove regulations, but like you said, there's the tax incentives to develop. So I mean, to put the two together, in a sense, I mean, to explain, I don't know if I'm explaining it right, I'm not.
We're not gonna run the show. Government doesn't build housing, government doesn't finance private construction, that's not what we're gonna do. But I think getting some of the things out of the way that are in the way, that's something we can do.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, that's,
But you
how
wanna-
do you phrase that?
Yeah, and you wanna make sure it's citywide, it's not just a downtown focus.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Citywide, and then goals in order to do that citywide would be specific towards regions and activities. So you would have recreation as part of the city, you would have, you know, the suburban areas as part of the city, and, you know, one of the things that does make us real viable is the medical facilities that we've got.
Mm-hmm.
So, moneymakers are very likely gonna be, besides oil and gas, those medical facilities that are out on the east side of town. What's it take to get, to fine tune that application, but, so it's gonna make the city attractive to investors, just as you'd written, Carter. And then the goal in my mind would be to make the city attractive to investors to, you know, promote business growth here. And in order to accomplish that, we're going to, analyze any of our processes that might slow that down, that are unnecessary in the downtown area. We would like to encourage development and building in the downtown area. We would like to encourage all the utilities and fiber optics you need to start up a big business, whether it's on the outskirts of town or in the center of town. But likely that would be on the outskirts, because why would you want to refit all those old buildings? So put it out in a new development. But I think we look at the whole thing, and the way we accomplish that is by doing these different steps. So
We could have set as an objective, just for example, maybe the city would work with some local developers to bring in some people who've been very successful at using the Opportunity Zone tax credits, and give us a roadmap for how they made that work.
or do we just work with CADA and let them bring it in?
Yeah.
Because we pay them to do that,
That's
and
right.
and Charles will be willing to do it. He's probably got a million plans in his back pocket right now. Let them do exactly what we've contracted them to do, and
And you could also make an objective saying, having some four-year degree opportunities in Casper would make it a more attractive place for a certain segment of the population, but that would be an objective under this goal.
yeah, that would help support the other goal. You know what else makes we could put that goal on there, because everything else supports that. Solid infrastructure, public safety, and Kristen's right. You pull up the headlines, meth dealer busted, these guys busted for, constantly see the drugs and all that kind of stuff. Well, it doesn't matter if that's a massive pervasive problem. That's what people want to read. So anybody that's building a newspaper or a news agency is going to print that. We in turn put the actual stats available to the public on what is our crime picture look like in Casper. What's our fire picture look like? What's your average wait time at rush hour? 5 minutes. I mean,
Well, and like Chris says that, okay, you talk about the meth problem. Well, I don't know of any other community that stepped forward as well as Casper did, with Chief Pagel, saying, well, we have a problem and we're going to do something about it. We're going to be the town that does something about it, instead of just kicking the dog around and saying, oh, it's a bad thing.
mm-hmm.
And to use that as a little bit of an example about, well, what can we do about some of these other things? The meth conference, I think, was a really good positive thing. Maybe, promote or sponsor some, you know, some development kind of conferences or something, that, like you were saying, that, you know, bring in somebody that can sit there and talk about, well, here's what we did with, you know, one of the, used to be a mall in Denver, now it's this, and look at how successful it is. You don't have to talk about doing that on that scale and all that stuff, but you can do it, you know, you can do it on smaller scales with different things.
And these are some objectives that Carter and the staff can kind of line out and show us and say, here's some of our ideas for how to achieve this goal, right? And I want to give Katie and her staff some kudos, because there have been a lot of positive articles in the paper lately about the David Street Station and some of the cool things that are going on in Casper, and that's hard to give column inches to those things, because there is all that negative drama that people want to read about, and you have to make a concerted effort to look for those positive stories, and I've seen them lately, so it's not all dark and gloomy. So, okay, so.
Could I add something, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think I'm picking up on with regard to potentially marketing our community, making it better for business development, more attractive and so forth, is the idea of doubling down on our focus with regard to what it is that we offer rather uniquely to the state and to our region. I had a lot of opportunity to visit with a number of folks from around the state this past week while at WHAM that really made me nervous. One of them was a visit I had with a couple of the councilmen from Cheyenne when they were crowing about the development that they think they're going to see in the form of a convention center and entertainment facility. I would hate to lose any modicum of business and activity that we get through our sports tourism industry that I think in Casper is really strong right now. And so working, in my opinion, with regard to bolstering that and perhaps even expanding that over the next 2 years would be something I think that we should really focus on. I like what Councilman Walsh said about the medical sort of inertia that we have right now, and the regional attraction that we have throughout the state is really critical. The other thing that I think we can talk about that Cheyenne cannot is with regard to the recreational assets that we do have. Hogadon being one of them. Looking at that differently is really important in my mind. The mountain and the river we've talked a lot about, I think, tonight as well as in meetings past. If we can talk about ways in which we can enhance the attractiveness of those assets that we have naturally going in our favor in face of a lot of competition that we've got coming up here on our near horizon, I think would be time well spent.
Well,
Again, you could flesh those things out underneath this overarching goal.
yeah,
Okay.
because if Cheyenne had a river, if Cheyenne had a lake, if Cheyenne had Casper Mountain, we would never be able to compete with them. If they,
Right.
you know,
Or the center of the state.
that's right.
So
Yeah.
let's try the language on this first goal and see how close we come to something everyone could live with. Thank you for taking notes, by the way.
No, you bet.
But how close does that come to what people have in mind? And if we want to change it, fine. So how did you read that, Carter, that overarching goal?
Enhancing the assets that we have available sort of naturally to us. That was one. Making the community more attractive for business development was another sort of overarching goal that I'm hearing as well.
Okay. 'Cause
I would
this
put
is-
that one first.
That's
and
the
then-
goal, and the other is more of an objective under the
Yeah.
goal, seems to me.
I agree.
Yep.
So,
Because we talk about diversity, we are dependent on minerals and a workforce, but there's other stuff out there. How do we make it more attractive for businesses to come in here to spread that out? Should be, I think, our number one. As far as that goal goes, I think public safety is our number one.
and we'll get to that. And I just keep going back to and attracting the workforce. Because the businesses and the workforce, go hand in hand.
I think that, in my mind, that does attract the workforce because we enhance those things that we've got, and we encourage the downtown development you were talking about. And
Do you have some language up there yet, Fleur, for this, or are we just running around?
Carter, will you say that again about the economic development you just said?
making the community more attractive for business development? Is that the one?
Yeah, that was the one.
Okay.
Making the community more attractive for business development. I like that.
How did I say it
simply
again? I
keep
can't
like
remember
that.
now. I
It's
said-
easier that says,
You said
have a page and a half of what you know.
Create the
conditions.
conditions.
For private investment in the city's
Well,
growth.
and how do you say, you know, build the community not only for the present and for the near-term future, but for the future, you know, instead of building the community for
Right.
20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
How do you guys react to that way to start it, to create the conditions versus make?
I think the word conditions,
Well, to create an
'cause whenever
atmosphere.
you add the word conditions, people think negatively.
Okay.
In my opinion,
That's fine.
I don't know.
Don't use the word condition, create the atmosphere. Create an atmosphere that will, create an atmosphere that will,
Enhance.
enhance the community of the future. Because you're right, if you start saying conditions, that's
Okay.
That's
I'm good
negative.
with that.
And because I thought about that and I thought no conditions, that's like you're spanking people.
Then would you want to say something like enhance economic diversity?
Well, that starts to, you know, an overarching goal is to create the conditions that will build the community of the future. The strategic sub-goals are economic diversity, you know.
Workforce development,
Yeah,
four-year college.
Those are the, you know, the strategic steps to get there. But
Efficiency of our amenities. Okay.
And we need to keep in mind the ability we have to do it. We can't change state law.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. We can hope to do that, which I'd like to do from a revenue standpoint. But we're not gonna change how the University of Wyoming does business. They give one block grant, and they're gonna spend it the way they see fit. We have no control over it.
Yeah, but to keep pushing in that direction, because we almost got it through this time to have 1 degree granted, just one, but still.
start as
So
a
Fleur,
start.
what, the language would be what then, Mike, you're saying?
Well, to to promote conditions that will enable us to build the community of the future.
I want flying jets.
Meaning all of the things.
Chris, I was going to say I want flying cars.
Yeah.
Assign a robot to everything.
Yeah,
Okay, okay, I'm sorry, okay, you're on column 4. All right. I
No,
thought we were still on column 2.
I'm in column
We don't
2
have any of this.
to create an overarching goal, and then when you step on, you've got your overarching goal here is
Okay.
to create the conditions that will promote the kind of community that we want in 5, 10, 20, 50 years. The specific objectives are kind of like your strategic steps along the way, how to try to get there.
So we need to get to the point
That's the way
where,
I'm
and maybe
talking.
we're fine in column 4, now that I look at it. Let's see if we can all agree on some actual language so that it's good enough that we could print it up on something like that. Chris?
That's what I was gonna recommend, Mayor. Let's pick 3 of our broad goals, and then we can,
See, I was thinking let's just do one at a time. And then,
and go through the whole
because-
thing.
Well, if we did one at a time, then we're done with it. When we get, if we did this one done, then we can go on to some public safety goal. We can do another goal on how we're gonna attract and take care of our workforce, if that's another major goal. And we can list them all now and then try to work on it, but I thought maybe just work on one at a time. So,
I think if we, I don't mind doing it either way, but if we listed, say, top 3,
okay,
then we don't overlap.
all right.
You know what I mean?
Okay, so what's the
I
second
keep doing
goal?
it. I keep looking at it and going, okay, and then we can add that in there. But I'm not opposed to doing it what you suggested.
What other themes besides this did people see in column 1 that we want to list as an overarching goal?
Public safety, I think.
Okay? So number 2 would be, how do we wanna say it?
Oof.
Mr. Mayor, last year's statement with regard to public safety was, and this is just a point to start at all, that's all it really is. Improve public safety, enhance the efficiency of police and fire operations. That was last year's statement.
That's part of my question. Why do we beat ourselves to death? We haven't started with that yet.
The problem is if you start with something, there's a tendency for everybody to just nod and say, well, that looks pretty good. And then we don't have this whole conversation we're having.
Well, if you do that, I mean, you know, we spent 2 days developing that last time, so.
Yeah. But it's a different group, wanna make
Well,
sure
maybe though
everybody
we
else
can
has
use
some
that
input.
as an outline and then say, well, what has worked, if anything, what has not worked, and what are some things that we could do to improve how we go about achieving that, because that's a pretty good goal statement, really.
I'm okay with it, if people like the way it was said last time.
We can't just keep saying the same thing and doing the same thing. I'm saying we could use that continue to have that as a goal, but then measure, what have we done in terms of trying to achieve that, and what should we be doing to try to better achieve it.
I look at that and I think we've got public safety, we've got, set Casper up to be the place where you wanna come put in a business, and all the rest of those fall under making Casper an attractive place for businesses to come to. Building our infrastructure, of course. Opportunities for public engagement, that's just basic responsibility. I don't think that needs to be a standalone individual goal. It's a supporting goal to all of these. I would go with those 2.
There's 2 goals. What about taking care of our employees?
Yeah, isn't that in the, no, you're right, but so, when I get,
third.
I mean, absolutely we need to. Is that what one you're?
Oh,
no,
sorry,
this one
this is
over here.
underneath. Yeah.
To me, it's not just about taking
That's what
care of
I think,
employees,
too.
it's about providing good service to the community, because when you have turnover, or you can't fill positions because you're not paying enough, the citizens don't get as good a service. And so we want our services to be top-notch, not mediocre.
Yeah, we need them to feel like, can't pay them everything you'd like to pay them, but it's fair. I think it needs to be consistent across the board. We need to take care of this health insurance problem. Talk about last Monday was President's Day, right? I overslept. I hear the trash truck outside and get out there just in time to see the guy driving the trash truck out of his truck getting my trash can, and he doesn't know who I am. I mean, that's...
They did that to me.
Something you'll never forget. It's
Did it to you too?
They did it for me too, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody that takes the job seriously, yeah. Ken, you were gonna say something.
So kind of go with what you're coming up with that goal 1, but also with the whole, with everything that you guys are saying. I just was taking his notes, putting it together to promote a community growth with positive incentive, which would include healthcare, which would include salary, which would include the downtown, which would include urban growth, which it would to promote a community growth with positive incentives. That includes I don't know, that's one that came to my mind.
Just
That
have
would
one goal.
kind of cover that basis.
Okay, reaction?
Well, I like the idea of taking care of our employees, because I think that fits right in with what I keep talking about, to emphasize to the employees that they're here to serve the people. And if you got good employees that feel good about their job and are being well taken care of and everything, that's gonna spill over into how they deal with people that come into them. If you got a constant turnover and somebody that's new on the job and everything, they're not going to be as good at dealing with somebody like me when I come in and I'm pissed because they're telling me I've got to do this or do that. and they're not gonna be as schooled in how to say, well, wait a minute here, sir, we can help you with this. We can show you how you can make this work, instead of just, well, you gotta do this way, and that's the way it is.
That gets us down to the retention challenge, the steep issue, so.
Yeah, isn't,
Well, I guess that would be a way to do this, would be to have that first goal that we already wrote, and then have a second goal that could be very similar to the public safety goal we have up here, and then maybe a third goal about, we're going to, I don't know how we would say this, we're basically gonna treat our employees in a manner that enhances their commitment to their work and has them feel good about being city employees.
Could I add maybe something to that? So I know I'm not the only one, but about 25 years as an employee, if the city council said, I'm gonna make a goal that wants to enhance your commitment, I would just go off the reservation.
Yeah, well, that was.
What I
just
would like
talking
to
out
hear,
loud.
what I would like to hear is, this body is
Yeah.
going to enhance our commitment to our employees.
All right.
Let's throw that around. I'm not gonna go out there and say, all right, hey, you guys have been here for 12 hours already today. You better be happy.
I'd be happy that.
Because
you're
that's
doing
what
this.
it is. And here's two prime examples right here. There's another 12-hour day for you. Instead, I hope you took Friday off. And that should be your attitude, in my opinion. And that goes all the way down. When you recognize, hey, a guy came and picked up me and Ray's trash can because we overslept. Whose fault is that? Shoot a message of thanks, get a response from it. Give that guy a positive feedback. And then we got the pay and we've got the benefit issue that we have to address, and then we have to balance budget. So I would shut down building projects in order to balance the budget and normalize pay and that kind of stuff. But
And I would second that.
I kind of agree with what you're saying. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our voters, and we also have a fiduciary responsibility to our employees. So I think somewhere in there, we have to make sure we can do it with the numbers we have. It's great to put down, we'd like to say we pay you more, but sometimes that's just not in our power. And so I'd be a little bit hesitant to write a goal that implies that this group as a group is committed to pay you more. I think that would be a mistake for us to do that. And I really think along with that, I think looking at pay for performance versus time and service is something that's a little bit different to government agencies, but that is the way the rest of the world works. And I think we should look at that.
No,
But that's not necessarily something that would be in our 4 big goals.
It could be an objective underneath.
Well, it's just something we gotta be thinking about. Rather than put all the details in, I think those are the kind of details that need to be worked out by staff.
How would it sound if we just talked about the overarching goal of providing the highest quality services to the citizens, and then one of the objectives would be
That goes a long way.
retention and proper compensation and benefits for the employees, which is how you achieve that, by keeping your good people and having people feel good about working for the city.
I think even saying in there, competitive, being able to say that we can, we talked about competitive wages. I know that's gonna be tough. I mean, when we're talking about that, I mean, I think we can try to get to that point where we can make it competitive.
Yeah, labor psychology actually has pretty well proven that, money is a satisfier, but it's not a motivator.
Right.
So just so we can move forward, I don't want to be too pushy about this, but could we land on those 3 as our goals? Does anybody
That
see,
covers most of what we're talking about.
it sounds good to me.
does anybody see a need to change the wording of the public safety goal that we have from last time?
I don't have a suggestion, but improve public safety. I hate it. Improve it. What's that mean? But actually, it's a broad goal, so we do want to improve public safety. The manner in which it's improved is spelled out in the objectives that goes in with that. But so that requires PD, code enforcement, animals, CFD to all have their own and certainly that, historically, that's existed in all those, so.
All right. And then when it gets to the highest possible service delivery or high-quality service delivery to the citizens, I hope you're all okay with Carter and his staff coming up with some proposals for us that might shift some funds around, might be some costs associated with trying to increase our compensation or whatever that would take, or eliminating some projects to make that happen. And they'll come back, you can come back to us with these proposals and say, these are the objectives, then we would pursue to achieve that goal.
I'm good with that.
We can give him full reign to do that, right, I assume? Okay.
Could we evaluate the wording on that a little bit, on that particular goal? I can't read from back here what might be up there, but do we capture that with regard to what we have?
Which one are you talking about,
Number
Carter?
one, I can read that out loud.
The employee sort of oriented retention goal.
I don't have anything.
Well, I don't
written
think
for
we've
that.
gotten to the real.
I was
word.
sort
No,
of-
I was reading it, I'm like, I don't see it either.
I was making the case
I
that
can't
we
see
should
it all.
focus on the quality of the services to the citizens.
And I think that's
I
a
agree
very
with you.
appropriate aim.
And then underneath that, we're talking about taking care of our employees to
Okay.
make sure those services are of high quality.
Right.
Well, if I could add, Mr. Mayor, Council, many would suggest that pay is a part of the issue, but adequate staffing is another part of the issue. Many are feeling as though we are overburdening them with the reduced amount of staffing that we have on tap and the various services that we offer and that kind of thing. I think if indeed we're talking about quality service delivery, we may have to talk about adequate staffing and finding the balance between competitive pay and adequate staffing with a finite amount of dollars to deal with
Which comes first?
is a
Carter?
balance. Yeah, that's right, it's a
Chicken-
balance.
Chicken and the egg.
No, I think that's absolutely
Yeah.
appropriate, and we should do exactly that, and if we need, we can slow down massive beautification projects and that kind of thing, or in order to right-size our workforce, and nothing's lost by doing that. Might not be a new creation of something, but we improve our internal efficiency. And that means get an engineer like the Judge talks about.
Yeah.
Kristen.
Well, and,
Mike, let Chris talk, please.
It's at, I mean, this is like at a very low level, like this isn't at this level at any point, but I would say one thing that does seem to help as far as when you talk about competitive salaries, competitive wages, benefit packages, things of that nature. Well, still, but in the past, if somebody would come to me and be like, well, you're paying me whatever, $15 an hour, this place up the road offered me $17 an hour. I think it doesn't hurt to give them like an annual statement along the lines of, okay, this is what I pay you in dollars. Here's what you receive in benefits, whether that's health insurance, whether that's, oh my gosh, I don't even know I mean, benefits are endless. So I mean, like at my work, we pay for the
Retirement.
well, state
exactly.
retirement. fund.
Match retirement of 3%, and like there's just so many benefits, and I think it's really easy for people to lose sight of, oh well, that place will pay me $2 more an hour, but my health insurance deductible now just went up to $12,000 and it was $3,000 before, but they just see the dollars. And so I think it's not just pay, it's the entire
The whole
package.
Yeah.
So an objective could be to, improve communication with existing staff regarding the benefits of working for the city.
That's always been readily available.
Well, but and it's tough because I look back to when I was 25 years old and started out in the state retirement plan. That was just something that was so far
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, who cares?
And how do you tell
Seems
a
like a joke.
25 or a 30-year-old
Yeah.
that this retirement plan has value? Well, when you're 50, 55,
Yep.
60, all of a sudden then, oh yeah, I was really dumb back then, but now I'm smart because
But you can educate people
Yeah,
about those things,
but,
and so, yeah.
but,
okay.
but you're exactly correct about that.
But you're
And-
right, and that is done in a lot of companies. Because we sit here and we look at the total package, we say, what does that employee cost us? Well, yeah, you got the hourly rate, and then you multiply about 1.35 times that, somewhere to get the really value of that employee.
Let's leave this in Carter's able hands. He's gonna
Exactly.
develop
Exactly,
these
yes.
objectives.
Yeah.
So how close are we now to 1, 2, and 3? I'm gonna suggest that 1, I don't like the word make. I would suggest a word like enhance the attractiveness of the community?
Or promote,
Promote?
enhance, well, you know, some of those words get, everybody's gonna promote this, and enhance is a better word, but there's gotta be a better word.
Demonstrate.
Well,
That's why I think
How
promote
about
is-
demonstrate? Take pictures.
But we're gonna promote it anyways, because you're trying to bring business in, and that's what we're doing. We're promoting our community
Yeah.
to the businesses to relocate here.
But promoting doesn't really mean you're gonna change anything. It just means you're gonna advertise what you've got. I like the idea, well, I mean, I use the word enhance because that implies we would actually be doing some things to make the community more attractive, not
Right.
just try to persuade people.
I think enhance, and I don't think we're just playing with words here, because the words that you use reflect the priority that you put to it and
It
what
matters
you're
how it
actually
looks,
going
yeah.
to be doing.
I like it.
I like enhanced better than promote.
Hence,
agree
and
with
the way I would
you,
like it is
what you're saying.
enhance
We
the
are.
attractiveness of the community is how I think the wording should be.
Mr. Mayor, we heard some discussion here about marketing appropriately as well versus working against what shows up in the media from time to time. Is it appropriate to assume that that could be an objective in this
Absolutely.
as
I
well?
think so.
Okay.
I
Absolutely.
think that falls within that.
I think an objective would be maximizing Visit Casper personnel, you know, CADA, all of them, let's use all those.
Okay.
And the city can play a role in bringing groups together too that have similar objectives. And that's happened. So, and the city has played a role. So how close are we to 3 overarching goals at this point?
Can you guys see them?
I like them all. I wish I had a better wording suggestion on number 2, improve public safety. So, you know
Maybe
what,
say
if
it
we
con-
follow the
continue
same theme,
improving.
well, because maybe we haven't, we don't know what the stats are.
Continue to
Um,
make advancements in public safety.
We've
We
got,
made some big
we've got
advancements
enhanced
last
the
year.
attractive, we don't know that.
Well,
Hire
continue
10
to
folks.
promote.
We
Gotta
don't
be
know,
doing something.
but you don't know, you can assume that, you haven't seen anything that shows what the,
No,
so, enhance the attractiveness of the community, enhance, the well-being and public safety of the community. The next one, if we added enhance to that too, then we could go with a common theme.
How about something like increase the capabilities of our public safety operation?
Maybe it's just because my ties with it. I don't care if their capabilities are increased if they're not used. So
just use the
what
word
is
enhance
that?
again works.
What we want to see is if we've got them on horses with cans on a string, but they're keeping crime out of the way, they've just enhanced it over somebody in a Jetson's car.
I'm gonna leave it to you guys. This is your area. However you think it should word,
So
I'm
I don't know.
good with that.
I like that.
Did we
Enhance
wanna
the public
keep-
safety and the efficiency of the police and the fire operation. I think that's,
Did
I
you
like
just
it.
do that? Oh, I thought, was I misreading it the whole time? Because I like it too.
Did it while you were saying.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, and I would suggest that, you know, and from the perspectives that I have seen, you know, we can sit here and say, well, there are things that we still need to improve with the, with police, fire, all those things. But I gotta tell you, from the perspective of my career and everything, the police department is so much better than what it was 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. It is incrementally, you know, really and truly, I think in a lot of ways has kept up. There
Oh, I
certainly
do
are some
too.
things that we need to work on, but, you know, you look at what guys were doing back when America was great compared to what is being done now. We're meteorically better than it was back then.
So how do we like the way 2 reads then?
I like
I like,
How do we like the way 3 reads?
well, do you want to put enhance? I don't know if it really fits in there.
Not me. I'm good.
I'm fine with it too.
All right.
I'm good.
All right.
Well,
So
I-
then, Steve.
That is cool.
I was
That
just
doesn't
gonna
read right.
provide the highest quality
Yeah.
services to citizens. Maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, or to say continue improving the service to people. But that sounds good, those are good goals.
What were you gonna say, Steve?
No, I was just gonna ask on one, could we actually end that after development? We know we're gonna attract a workforce if we bring business development here.
For me, I like it, and because it emphasizes that we're trying to, that without the people, the businesses aren't coming.
That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Enhance found out with their research, is we just don't have the workforce that people are looking for.
Well, I think I see Steve's point of it almost, just the way the sentence reads, it almost to some degree would need to be separated. But what if we said, enhance the attractiveness of the community for business and workforce development?
Okay,
That'll work.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Okay, let's move on then, if we're good with those three. Now, the reason now that we have the column to the left is that we do have a contract with the community as far as 1% expenditures. But the point has been made that we've been much more strict than many other communities about this capital versus operations distinction with 1%. And Jolene made the point, and I agree with her, that when people say they want to see 1% spent on public safety, that doesn't necessarily mean they just want cars and fire trucks. They might, in their mind, say, well, I want to see our police department adequately funded. And most of our expenditures on the police department are salaries. And so we have made that distinction very clear over the years. But I guess I just wanted to open up the discussion is, without an agenda to change anything, but just to see if you all are still feeling that way, or should we ease up on that a little bit and allow some of those funds to take care of things like number 3. I'm going to go with Steve first, Bob, and then.
So I guess just to hear what you're saying is that potentially looking at 1 cent funds being used towards wages.
I'm just kicking it out there.
Okay, and the only thing I would have against that is once you give a person a wage, that 1 cent goes away, then we've got to find another place to fund those, to continue funding that, because that doesn't go
That's the
away
meat
with
of
it.
it.
That is true, although that's how most communities live.
Well,
So I'm not saying it's the right way to live, but that's how most of them live. But
Can we do it outside of salary where we use 1 cent for training, travel? Because I don't think it goes there, it pulls from there now. But you would free up a pretty good chunk of general fund by using it outside of salaries. Because what makes a good police department is the people and the training that they have, not the nature of the gadgets. So that is the focus of an excellent force. Same with fire.
well, then you could make the same argument for all of our departments, really.
I think you could.
That there are things that you could spend some 1 cent money on that would improve their services
Well,
without
training, travel, and
necessarily.
overtime are big money drains in the
Yeah.
city, and
Any comments on this, Carter?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The having spoken at a number of the public gatherings with regard to the promotion of 1%, we tried to establish the expectation that indeed the 1% funding would be dedicated primarily to one-time costs and capital-oriented kinds of things, which indeed, when you talk about reducing the amount of capital in order to make available funds for operational kinds of needs like salaries and so on, that really would come in the balance of how you use 1% funding. Because if you recall, we really don't use any other funding for capital expenses. We used to use the direct distribution dollars for capital expenses, But now 100% of that is sucked into operations and salaries and so on. So if you're talking about tamping down capital in order to support and supplement operations, you're really talking about 1% dollars, because we just don't have capital dollars coming from elsewhere.
Well, and, you know, we are talking about the problem of, like Steve said, the problem of funding ongoing needs with optional money. And whether if you use that optional money to pay for training, travel, equipment, salaries, or whatever, you are still using optional money to pay for ongoing needs. And if that optional money ever goes away, those ongoing needs, whether if you've been, you know, spending it for capital, buying cars and trucks, or whatever, you're still going to have a financial crisis there. There's that aspect of the problem, and yes, it has been more palatable to the voters, I think, to go in and say, well, we're buying, you know, we're not just spending this money because, oh, spending, that's a bad thing. But, oh, if you're using it on a capital project, that's a good thing. So, you know, whether if it's for salary or for cars or for whatever, you know, it's still optional money, ongoing need. There's that aspect of this 1 cent business. The other thing that I think when you have a downturn like what we had, you know, a couple of years ago, and we always seem to have, because we love to tax industry instead of people. But and when there's a downturn and you're sitting there saying, well, we can't, you know, we're going to have to lay off employees, we're going to have to cut the workforce, we're going to have to do all these drastic steps to balance the budget, but we've got all of these capital projects that we can keep funding because that money comes out of a different pot. That becomes difficult for your average citizen to understand. Mm-hmm. That why is it that you can, you know, you're able to afford to do all of these things that they might look at as, oh, $1 billion project for something or another.
You're building a ski lodge and you can't pay your own employees.
Yeah, you know, and
that's 100
that's
times.
I know, and I didn't want to say that because I want to spend some more money. but yeah, mm-hmm. And that you know, why can we spend, you know, $50,000 more building decorative kind of intersections somewhere instead of $50,000 less building a plain vanilla intersection, and then maybe hiring more police officers or more firemen or more clerks to serve the people here in this building. That's tough for people to understand, and frankly for me it's like sometimes it can be hard to explain, because it is a little bit hard to explain. Well, we can do this, but we can't do that because we promised that we would spend this money this way. This money came with some strings attached to it, and it's good to have strings attached to some of this stuff, because if you didn't, then, you know, there wouldn't be any control over it. And but how do you balance all that?
I just think it's good to get it on the table that this very strict rule that we have had in place about 1 cent is capital is our rule. Nobody's imposing that on us. If we want to live with that, fair enough.
Just another comment on it.
But it's our rule.
Yeah, it's been fairly quiet for the last 2 1 cents on what the other options are. The other option is bonding, and in every case, bonding is a much better deal, a terrible deal for taxpayers. Now, granted, the price of bonding is fairly cheap today, but if we didn't have the 1 cent, our capital requirements would probably be coming with the bond if we could ever get it passed. And therefore, we wouldn't have new fire stations. We wouldn't have good equipment for our people to work with, because Casper has been able to avoid the bonding issue, and a lot of other communities can't avoid that. So they're paying somebody else to use that money for 30 years, and we have a 1 cent project. That project is paid for the day it opens. And so it's the cheapest way to go. And
Well, I
that
think we're
really
all in
hasn't been
favor
a
of
big
1
issue
cent.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we passed it at 76%, because most of the people in the city of Casper understand that.
Yeah. and I don't wanna lose that support, but I just wanted to put this out there. Kristen?
I mean, I was just looking, obviously I wasn't here last year, but I was looking through last year. I would only say the one thing is, if Carter and his staff put in an enormous amount of time and effort, like educating people that the funds were used for capital projects, I mean, it just would almost kind of step over it. I mean, if they've put on all these meetings and all these presentations and then we kind of change the tune, it just might not
You wanna keep
be
your deal.
perceived
And-
well.
And I think too, that if you look back to when that 1% thing came along, the first time that was put up for a vote, it was not at all a sure thing. You know, there was, you know, oh, well, these tax and spend people and everything, and Ken Erickson and council back in those days, I think from a wise marketing standpoint, they said, no, we are gonna use this for one-time capital things, and that made it easier to sell to the voters. And we've kind of followed along with that. I was talking to Phil Hines about, well, how do they do that out in Evansville? And he said, oh, it's just rolled into our general fund. And we never, but frankly, he said, you know, we kind of hide behind the fact that you guys are out there and you market it that way. And you know, and we're kind of able to just sort of slide along that way. But he said, you know, he said Mills, Evansville, and Barnett, he said all of us would, and he said in the county too, without that, you know,
For operations.
day-to-day operational things would just crash.
Well, I don't wanna spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to see if you guys thought either goal 1, 2, or 3, if 1% funding would have any role to play in working toward those goals, or if we should keep that hard line in place.
Maintain our course.
Okay, Ken?
I was gonna say, if anything, I think I agree with about the salary, I don't think, but what about, the insurance or the benefits? Because benefits come and go with a lot of companies. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. You know, if a company goes through a hardship, first thing to go, a lot of times is your benefits. So I mean, if for some reason the 1 cent didn't pass, you know, we may have to look at a different option for the benefits of the city employees, and that could come down the road, and that it very well could, but I don't see why we couldn't use the 1 cent at least for the benefits for the city employees.
Is there any more clarification we could give to you on this, Carter? Am I framing the question properly? Or should we just kind of leave it as it is?
Well, I think if council wanted to give me thumbs up on a track, one way or the other, that'd probably be more clear.
For 1 cent, Carter.
Right.
Whether loosening up the rules would be allowable.
Right.
Steve?
Well, I just personally think that if we go off of what we do now, we loosen up the rules, so to speak. If it goes towards anything, whether it's wages, whether it's benefits, if it goes away, then you've got another problem to deal with down the road. I would rather find permanent funding for a lot of these things that we don't have to rely on 1 cent money. And hopefully it never does go away, but if it does, it's gonna be another problem for us or another council down the road.
I do like to think that the reason we got 75% is because we've been keeping our deals.
I agree.
So I
Would
understand what
imagine
you
the
guys are saying, but I also
Only
understand the
procedural.
pressure that Carter is under to pay the bills, and we've talked about, you know, trying to take care of our employees. Well, there's only so much money, and there's only so many pots of money, and you know, he's kind of hamstrung with the revenue picture that we have. So
I don't, and I hesitate to even say this out loud, but I'm gonna say it out loud to see how it sounds. The only slight erosion of that might be that, you know, some language in that commitment that, you know, these are the things that we're going to do. However, folks, be aware, if there is a major catastrophe and funding goes down and everything, we may have to use this to maintain basic services. And I absolutely agree with Councilman Friel here that and with what Bob was saying, that, you know, we need to, because that commitment has been a big thing, and I think it's part of what makes that work. But I am sensitive to this idea that if, you know, if we got no money to buy groceries, but we're buying a new car.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm sure how it looks to some people,
Mhm.
you know, that, yeah, okay, so you're doing these capital construction projects because you said you would, but you've got 70 fewer employees than you had, trying to do the same amount of work.
Well,
And
that's,
you're down
just
50.
not, that's not just appearance, that's the reality.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, it is
Exactly
the
what it
reality.
is.
And
Yeah.
That's why I think we should maybe say something like, in general, we strive to only spend it on capital. What if, when, you know, we come in to work on the health insurance thing, and we've got 13 million and 1 cent that we could right-size that and then stabilize it so we don't fall
Keep
into
it there.
another hole. Is that a bad use of that money? I don't think so.
I believe that the average citizen doesn't make that clear distinction that we make. And when they say public safety, they mean the whole shebang. They don't just mean the capital construction and the capital needs. But if you think we should just leave it because that's the way the discussions were held with the public, we can sure do that. And I understand what you're saying, Steve. You create real risks when you start using more.
No, but I guess coming back to what Chris is saying, though, I mean, if there's a certain amount of money that would put us back to where we need to be, to where we can move forward, I'm looking at advance of there. That, you know, I don't want us to depend upon 1 cent money to continue to fund something. But if it's a one-time lump amount of money that we need to make things right, then I absolutely see that. I think that's a good use. And then at the same time, it's up to us, or it needs to be communicated back to the citizens, the community as a whole, as to what we're doing and how it fits into.
And we've done that when we've gone back and reallocated some 1 cent that was not anticipated when we first passed it.
How about if we just leave this, because you guys are obviously gonna have some staff meetings over all of these things and how you're gonna implement them. Why don't you guys start kicking around some ideas, and if you can think of an objective or two that might give you just a little bit of room to solve a problem using 1 cent funds that doesn't violate the promise, just give it to us as a proposal, because these objectives are gonna come to us and we still have to sign off on them. And so so we'll still have a chance to say, I don't like how that looks. That's too far away from what 1 cent's supposed to be. And then that objective goes away.
Perfect. Massage it.
Is everybody okay with that? All right. Steve?
I just had a real quick. Do we have 1 cent funds that, from past 1 cent, that have not been expended, or are those always? Are we? Does that make sense? Are we always up to date, or are there 1 cent funds from 5 years ago that are still?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, we do indeed have residual balances of 1 cent funds. As a matter of fact, in the latest iteration of budget discussions and amendments, we did deploy those dollars. And incidentally, we deployed them in concert with the original resolutions that were passed back then. So we took that extra effort to make sure that the way we were deploying them was not inconsistent with the original resolutions that were written back 4 or 8 years or whatever it was ago.
Midwest Avenue is being partially funded with old 1 cent.
Yeah, I think it was
Right.
1.13 was as far back as we've gone.
Correct, that's exactly right. If I might add too, though, to continue to answer that question, you will find in reports that we're bringing forward to you very soon that 1 cent 15 will have a residual balance that we did not expect. And so we're going to request that be a policy added to your opportunity fund, so that indeed you can allocate those dollars out of one fund that have 1% character for purposes that we're going to propose to you. One-time funding to insurance, for example, could be one of those that you might want to think about, because the health insurance fund, unfortunately, will need one-time funds to bring it to a particular level of functionality so that a reserve can be established that would help weather the fluctuations that health funds have from time to time, and we're very familiar with. So be anticipating that type of discussion.
And I think what I'm hearing is people are fine with you giving those objectives to us, and we'll see what they look like.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, now, that last column on the right is the one we're talking about, and I think we're pretty going to have to delegate that to Carter and his staff.
Yep.
But of course, we want to get to some performance indicators for all of those goals, those objectives as well. Does anybody want to comment on what those should look like, or do we want to just delegate that to Carter and his staff, Chris?
You know, that we've got a lot of them here are similar to exactly what I would like to see, but it's, you know, public safety, crime stats, fire stats, injuries, non-injuries. Is there something that trends in an injury report from our staff that shows a deficiency in training or equipment? They have to be hard numbers. To me, those can't be, you know, what's hard to measure is are you achieving your public engagement? Well, one measurement is we were on this many things, we update the website this many times. So if that information is produced in all the different levels that we know where to put it, that's all we can do, right? So we would achieve that, but everything can be counted virtually, right down to, you know, the municipal benchmark book covers every single thing from the city attorney's office even to judges, and it's not numbers of convictions or non-convictions. It's so all of that it has to be very clear and not subjective.
That's why I put that column there.
But that's really not for us either. But that's what the outcome I'd like to see.
Well, let's see if we find it persuasive though, because if they work on performance indicators, we'll have a chance to look at them and say, is that data really going to be the data that proves it? Or is there something else that we'd like to see that will prove it?
Well, I'd like to see not only those hard numbers, but I think too that you know, things about the number of citizen contacts, for instance, with the police department, with police and fire. What's the number of you know, what's the average response time on calls? What's the average response time on emergent kind of calls versus non-emergent kind of calls? And you know, those kind of things. You know, like with the fire department, maintain the ISO 1 rating. I think it's a big thing, and that's a measurable. You know, that's a measurable thing that you can do. That's you know, a big deal for the community, because otherwise your fire insurance rates go up, and and so I think that those raw numbers like that for basically all of the departments, and you know, like yeah, it's nice to see what the building permit applications and all those things are, but if there'd be a way to quantify, well, how many inspections, how many consultations are there? And I know that we can't expect these departments, because you start spending all your time keeping track of what you're doing, you're not going to do anything other than keep track of what you're doing. And so, you know, we don't want to test ourselves into failure, but you know, something saying, you know, because if you got fewer employees with more public contacts, that can only keep going that direction for a while until everything's going to crash. And so I think we need to be looking at those kind of things too.
I'd like to also see like a 3 to 5 year comparison too, because if I just hear, well, here's this year's numbers, can't give you a picture. I like 5 because it spans the booms, and so another 5 would be in a jam, and it would be on another upslope. So
I agree.
Gives you a frame of reference. Yeah.
Well, what do you think?
If I could add one more comment, on that public safety piece, I like the fact that you kept that word efficiency in the goal statement there, because I think that does drive at a lot of that analysis and the comparative relative data to see if in fact we are becoming more efficient, or if despite our investments we're not seeing a lot of efficiency. That to me would be very telling as well.
Well, by setting those objectives, those should not be viewed as something that have to be successful. it can be a bad idea.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you dump it. It's the goal you're trying to achieve. So, all right, we're gonna go out and we're gonna do X, Y, and Z in order to achieve this. It didn't work. Don't hang on to it just because seemed like a good idea. Trash it. Find a different idea that works.
An objective is never a promise, it's always something you're shooting for.
Sometimes it becomes mine, and this means so much to me, I gotta make it work instead of sitting back going, well, I didn't have a very good idea.
You know, you don't wanna have a 5-minute response time. Well, yeah, okay, we got the guys going 100 miles an hour from Paradise Valley to the east end of town, and by God, they got there in 5 minutes.
All right, so it's 7:45. I don't know what your expectations were, everybody coming here, but
They've been met, thank you.
how's everybody feeling? Do you feel like we're
We're good. I like it.
Ken,
Thank you.
Steve?
No, let's have another meeting.
I think you've done a nice job.
Let's have another
You
meeting.
guys, are we good to move on? You guys take it from here?
I feel good, absolutely. Yes, thank you. Very good data.
All right, sounds good.
Very good data.
Well, fair enough. So we'll be doing this again 2 weeks from tomorrow. We're gonna see a product. And it's gonna take a little time for us to go through it in some detail and see, is that really what you were expecting? Or is there anything in there that looks like a landmine or some problem that is gonna, or something that's gonna create a problem for us down the road? And so, and you think two weeks is enough time for you to,
That would be my target. How about that?
okay. Ken?
When you say 2 weeks from now, do you mean that we'll meet on a Monday again or at a work
Well,
session regarding?
that's a good question.
Thank you, I have
Do-
them every now and then.
Do you think we need a separate meeting, or do you think we can leave this into an existing work session? Chris?
Let's let our second in command, first command, city manager decide that. If you think there's a lot to talk about,
I'd like to hear from all of you, because you're all gonna
I
have to come.
appreciate that. I think we can weave it into one, unless looks like it's real complex, but we can talk about that at a pre-session next week.
All right.
there you go.
Wow. What do we have on the agendas
We,
for work session?
we have wages and insurance, right? And so they're two very serious topics next week,
For
or
the
2
12th.
weeks, yeah.
For the 12th.
Not saying we can't do this too, but we do have a pretty serious.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
When you have a
Steve?
working document, could we just have that ahead of time?
Oh, heck
And we
yeah.
could all review it,
Mhm.
and we
Absolutely.
then we can come into a work session and knock it out.
Without a doubt.
And we might get into it for a few minutes and say, you know what? We don't have enough time for this, given everything else we have to do.
Yeah.
We'll either defer it again for 2 more weeks or schedule another night to meet. How's that?
Because I don't mind having more meetings or longer meetings if we are making if we are substantively working on something. But if we're having more meetings and longer meetings, just so that,
We got meetings.
yeah, you know.
That's when you guys can throw pencils.
I know that Chris loves meetings and wants to go long meetings, but I don't.
All right. Well, I'm trying to move this along. So, okay. Motion to move into executive session.
Don't we have
To
to go
discuss-
to we have to have a real meeting?
I'm sorry?
You have a script, we have to go into a.
Oh, yeah.
There it is.
Oh, that's right. I now call the February 25th, 2019 special council meeting to order. All council members are present, so we have to excuse Councilman Johnson. Can I get a motion to excuse Councilman Johnson?
So moved.
Vice Mayor Johnson.
Second.
Moved by Chris, I think I got Ken as second, and so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay. A notice of an executive session to take place at this date and during this meeting was given. We have matters to discuss regarding land acquisition and personnel. Therefore, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session, and at the conclusion of that executive session to reconvene this special meeting solely for the purpose of adjournment of this special meeting.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Pacheco, seconded by Councilman Hopkins. There being a majority of members present and a motion to adjourn into an executive session having been moved and seconded, and that motion requiring a 2/3 majority of the council present, please cast your vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. A greater than 2/3 majority of the council present voted in favor of the motion. We are hereby adjourned into an executive session.
Do we have these shut down?
Oh, The chair would entertain a motion, oh no, never mind. There's a lot to happen between those two lines.